Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name is Stuart Reed, and over the next 20 minutes or so, I'll be covering some of the recent research that we've conducted here at Nominet with enterprise leaders. Now, this is an interactive session, so very happy to take your questions. Please do use the panel on your screen to type your questions, and at the end of the presentation, I'll be happy to answer those. So a little bit of an introduction. So historically, businesses have been fairly hesitant to adopt cloud. It requires relinquishing control to third parties, and many have previously thought that on-premise solutions were more secure, or at least perceived to be more secure. We're starting to see now that many organizations are actively adopting cloud. So these concerns around security look like they are waning somehow. But as part of this presentation, we'll explore what is happening in regards to attitudes to security and what mitigating aspects organizations are applying in order to safely adopt cloud as part of their ongoing strategies. We, as part of our research, looked at the role of security teams in cloud adoption and cloud migration. And to find out the thoughts of these professionals, we polled CISOs, CIOs, CTOs, and also their equivalents that are in charge of their organization's cybersecurity. So in total, we conducted a survey of around about 300 respondents who are in charge of their organization's cybersecurity. These respondents were sourced from organizations with 2,500 employees or more within both the UK and the US. We, as part of the research, spanned industries and sectors including automotive, CNI or critical national infrastructure, finance, government, healthcare, hospitality, legal, life sciences, retail, transport and utilities. So a broad spectrum of large organization sectors that are looking at cloud adoption policies. And the aim of this was to make sure that we had accurate conclusions on the opinions that we sought, the behaviors and the mindsets of those behind cybersecurity decisions at those large organizations across those sectors. So what's the challenge then? Well, cloud adoption is increasingly integral and necessary across a wide variety of sectors. And that means that adoption is becoming more and more ubiquitous. And it's perhaps unsurprising as lots of organizations are embarking on their own agendas for digital transformation to see that cloud is playing a pivotal role in those ambitions as they roll out into production. At the same time, threats are becoming more and more complex for organizations worldwide. And the challenge really is balancing your cybersecurity with your cloud innovation as part of your digital transformation initiatives to make sure that you're keeping your business both relevant but also safe and secure. Now, to add a little bit of context, I'd like to share with you some of the findings about the general adoption of cloud that we're seeing through those respondents that we spoke to as part of our research. What's interesting here is the vast majority, so 88% of those respondents that we spoke to said that they were either actively engaged or planning to adopt cloud and SaaS solutions. Reflected here across all verticals is the responses that we've seen, and one notable difference across those spectrums is around CNI, which is currently lagging at maybe 64%. And this is possibly due to elevated security concerns within those organizations, but it has to be said that 64% of those in CNI verticals or categorized as CNI are either embarking on or actively planning for cloud policies or cloud adoptions. Which solutions are going to be adopted here? Well, we explored the type of solutions that customers or those polled are looking to adopt, and the majority said SaaS. So 3/4 of those we spoke to, or almost 3/4, said that SaaS and IaaS, so software as a service and infrastructure as a service, are the ones that are most popular or most actively being considered right now. Much fewer of those that we spoke to had moved to the later stage of cloud services, such as PaaS, which is platform as a service, and an even smaller number of those that we spoke to are actively embarking on BPaaS, which is business process as a service. And we can see from here that BPaaS in particular, as a utility, is still unfolding and evolving as we move forward. When we start looking at the type of cloud providers that customers are embarking on right now, then it's perhaps no surprise that the 5 that we see here are top of mind. Google Cloud appears to be the market leader in terms of cloud adoption services, so just over half of those that we spoke to are using them. Just behind Google Cloud sits IBM, followed by Oracle, Microsoft with their Azure platform, and also Amazon with their web services. It's a fairly split market, but the split between all of these cloud services is perhaps indicative that organizations are choosing to source their cloud solutions from more than one provider. As we dig deeper into concerns people had about cloud, both currently and in the past, we can see that nearly half of those, so 48%, stated that their business uses a multiple cloud approach. So kind of reflecting the previous slide in terms of the split between the 5 largest cloud suppliers, this is perhaps unsurprising. A third of those that we spoke to, more broadly a third, said that their organization is currently engaged in using cloud services from just one provider. And the rest, so almost a quarter of those that we spoke to, are using what we call a hybrid cloud approach, which is really in reference to using various clouds that are integrated into an overarching system, which may include also on-premise assets from those customers. It's clear that most of the respondents we spoke to are either extremely or moderately concerned about the malicious activity within their cloud ecosystems and infrastructures. And that was indicated by almost 3/4 of those that we spoke to, 71% of those. Interestingly, participants from the US were almost twice as likely from those in the UK to be extremely concerned. And this could be for a variety of reasons, which could be around differing compliance regimes, for example, the threat landscapes that they're facing, and perhaps also the mainstream media coverage that we're seeing bubble under around some of the security breaches that are taking place most recently. Now, those from heavily regulated industries are more likely to be very or extremely concerned by the risk posed by cloud. And these industries include healthcare, financial services, and pharmaceuticals. And so it's perhaps not surprising that they're slightly more cautious when it comes to adopting cloud security. Now, we have high adoption rates showing that cloud security is perhaps not acting as much as a barrier to cloud deployment as might have done in the past. However, we also took this opportunity to explore some of the specific concerns that lay within cloud security. And considering the punitive fines that are currently being put into place and actioned, it's perhaps no surprise that loss of customer data is the top concern amongst those that we spoke to, just over half of those respondents. Just behind that was really the increasing sophistication of cyber criminals and the increasing threat landscape that we're seeing from a cyber perspective. And that was also then followed in turn by IoT, or Internet of Things, that increased and widened the threat surface that we're seeing. So IoT is a critical issue to tackle, and this is reflected within our findings here, as they're increasingly becoming central to new business models and also those customer experiences that organizations are embarking on. So how does this perceived risk of cloud compare to that on-premise? And it's quite interesting here because the gap between the perceived risk of cloud services compared to those of on-premise assets appears to be closing. And this is quite important and significant, as in the past, security has been cited as a key barrier to cloud adoption. Only 37% believe that the risk to be higher with cloud services than those that are on-premise. And some good news here is that almost 2/3 of those we spoke to, 61%, thought that the risk was either the same or lower. And so this starts to reflect a growth in the confidence and the understanding on how cloud can be secured as part of a digital transformation initiative. Respondents that have suffered a breach, though, in the last 12 months are perhaps understandably more likely to believe that cloud is a higher risk than our on-premise solutions and are slightly less reluctant to fully embrace the benefits as a result of their previous experience of being breached. However, it is worth noting that this does differ from industry to industry. Utilities, healthcare, and government, for example, view cloud as significantly riskier than other companies do. And perhaps this is as a result of these industries having suffered damaging high-profile breaches in the past and now have a fairly low appetite for risk as they move forward. So next, as part of our questioning, we decided to analyze the processes and tools that our respondents use when adopting cloud. Cloud is not the only security challenge, and it's not only viewed as a security challenge, but also as a security enabler. And perhaps this is representative of a significant shift in terms of the attitude that organizations have held before around security in general. Seeing security as an enabler to digital transformation is definitely a marked shift in terms of it being viewed historically as perhaps a blocker or a barrier to adopting new techniques. And it's quite evident here that businesses are now really understanding the significance as security as an enabler as part of their digital initiatives, as an overwhelming 92% of those respondents are either engaged in or planning to adopt cloud-based security solutions moving forward. And there are a variety of tools that are being used here, including firewalls, email security, antivirus or anti-malware, and also data loss or data theft prevention. And there is a variance in tools used depending on the organizations and sectors we discovered. DNS security or a DNS domain name system security has had a high uptake in sectors like legal, retail and hospitality, whereas identity access management gets traction in finance, CNI and automotive. And it's probably worth noting here in terms of the DNS piece is that we're really talking around how those organizations are utilizing the insight within DNS to be able to drive some level of proactive cybersecurity. So what are the top factors really driving cloud adoption? So the biggest one of those that we're seeing is improved features and functionality. So just over half of those we spoke to see that as one of the big drivers for their reasons of moving towards cloud adoption more rapidly. The need for secure access anywhere as we start moving towards a more diverse and a more mobile or flexible workforce, then the need for being able to understand and secure those mobile users becomes even more significant, and almost a half of those that we spoke to see that as one of their real key drivers for cloud adoption. And of course the cost and agility benefits that cloud bring are also central to those policies and those strategies that organizations are looking to drive as they embark on those digital initiatives that we spoke about earlier on in this presentation. And this really combined starts to reflect a shift in attitude towards cloud and how that can be used as a business driver and a business enabler for organizations moving forward. Some of the main drawbacks that we found by the respondents that we spoke to are around data privacy. So almost half of those we spoke to are still concerned about data privacy issues as they move into more cloud-based initiatives. Staff expertise and training are also key on the agenda there in terms of making sure not only do they get the best out of their cloud investments, but also that the security posture that sits behind those cloud initiatives is keeping pace. Integrity of the cloud security is hand in glove on that aspect as well. So 42% of those that we spoke to are still very concerned about how they apply cloud security from a technology perspective. And of course, budget also plays a role here, as well as organizations are looking at efficient and effective ways of adopting those cloud initiatives to drive their business goals. But what we're looking at here is that most of those drawbacks can be surmountable with the right tools and the right partners in place in order to drive those initiatives for them. The top considerations that we're also seeing are around cost effectiveness, integration with existing systems, and the ease of deployment. So a huge amount of the respondents we spoke to want to consume cloud services and they want to be able to do it on their own terms. Next, we looked at how organizations are managing their cloud as a service. And cloud has historically been used as a delivery mechanism for software. So software as a service, unsurprisingly earlier in the presentation, is one of the big areas that people are more readily adopting as part of their cloud migration strategy. And it's certainly matured as the market itself has matured. And so too have managed services that are starting to encompass cloud deployment models themselves. Nearly 2/3 of those that we spoke to say that they outsource to a managed service supplier right now, so 63% of those that we spoke to. The outliers to this response were within hospitality, CNI and transport, where those respondents are more likely to be outsourcing some of their security operations to a trusted managed security provider. 64% of those outsourcers scored their security stack highly compared to 35% of non-outsourcers. And so these outsourcers were also more likely to be seeing cybersecurity as an increasing priority for them and their businesses moving forward. We also then explore cloud security budgets of organizations and how these may change over time. So with the rise in demand for cloud security tools and services, it's really no surprise that almost 2/3 of those that we spoke to are expecting to see an increase in cloud budget as they move forward. Just 3%, so quite a small proportion of those that we spoke to, are predicting a drop in that budget. Respondents were also very positive about the future role of cloud as part of the security mix. Notable exceptions again were hospitality and pharmaceuticals, where budgets are largely expected to decrease in this area. Security-conscious leadership teams may not be the reason that cloud budgets are increasing, though. Respondents are likely to believe that their cloud security budgets are increasing if their business has been attacked in the last 12 months. So again, a lot of the people that we spoke to are seeing that some of the budget increases are purely as a reactive measure rather than a proactive measure. It's also clear from the findings of our research that businesses are committed to using the cloud more and more. It allows businesses to move far more quickly with more agility and also to pivot to new market opportunities at a reasonably low cost. It's becoming a lot more easy for organizations to try new approaches, try new concepts, try new business models in a very scalable way, and cloud allows them to scale up and scale down depending on the success of those particular initiatives that they're embarking on. Cloud, we're seeing, is being embraced by security teams to really bolster their enterprise defenses. Managed security services are increasingly allowing businesses to benefit from services assured with the highest levels of security maintained by those experts. And high value is being placed on security solutions that can be seamlessly integrated with existing infrastructures, either in-premise or beyond, and data within those needs to be protected wherever it resides. So regardless of whether it's on-premise assets or whether it's cloud assets, the recognition from the respondents that we spoke to is that data is absolutely paramount in terms of being protected wherever it resides or wherever it passes. And whilst organizations can be committed to the cloud, most are starting to take a hybrid approach. So they're looking at a more blended approach of integrating their existing network infrastructure or network assets into a more blended cloud approach to supplement what they already have today. So in summary, cloud will continue to play a fundamental role in enterprise security systems and ecosystems, and that's really evident from the results that we've covered here today. There are security concerns that do persist, but there seems to be a general shift in attitudes as cloud adoption rises and the risks are being better considered and mitigated. The risk is now seen as comparable to that of on-premise systems. So what's really important to note here is that security concerns more generally are not fading. The respondents are certainly taking security very seriously, but they are not drawing a distinction between the security approaches that they should take between on-premise assets and those that reside in the cloud. And we're seeing a narrowing of the gap and an appreciation that cloud security is as essential and is to be considered in the like of those security concerns that are already being considered as part of an on-premise strategy. The move to cloud won't be necessarily all-encompassing migration. So again, people that are looking at their migration strategies are perhaps taking a more considered view and a more gradual view of applying hybrid strategies. But it is likely that as cloud becomes more and more adopted, most of the existing investments and the alternatives that we're seeing here will be supplemented as they reach the end of their product life cycle. So the expectation is that more and more cloud adoption is likely to take place as the traditional on-premise assets reach a natural end of life. It's also really important that security tools have to be flexible enough to secure the enterprise strategy both today but also moving forward. And as we start to see the digital footprint become wider with the adoption of increased digitization and cloud driving some of that digitization initiatives, that enterprises are going to need to embrace the right level of security tools that scale in the same way that their business strategies are looking to scale moving forward. From a Nominet perspective, we recognize that as organizations are embarking on broader and more defined digital initiatives moving forward, that it's really important to maintain a good level of visibility. As the attack surface becomes invariably wider, it's really, really important that the security matches that widening attack surface in order to reduce the risks and mitigate the impacts should the worst happen. So at Nominet, we have developed a cybersecurity solution called NTX, utilizing the ubiquitous DNS layer within organizations. Any network that is communicating to another network relies on DNS, which is really the foundational cornerstone of the internet. And the rich information that we are able to see within the DNS layer allows us to predict, it allows us to detect, and it allows us to block threats before they cause harm on an organization's network, regardless of where that resides. NTX has the capability to cut through the vast swathes of data to give immediate visibility of threats and to preserve the integrity of the network at a very much a holistic level. DNS, as I mentioned, is a critical source of information to check for threats and to monitor the health of a network, but it is still often overlooked within the security stack. But as I mentioned before, it being a ubiquitous layer, it provides a huge amount of valuable information that if an organization is able to tap into that information, is able to get very granular insight into some of the activity and some of the malicious and suspicious events that may be happening at different parts of that network. And as we would be advocates of embedding security and cybersecurity as part of any digital initiative at its inception point, the reality is that some projects are being spun up that haven't necessarily considered the full implications of security. One of the key benefits that we're able to bring through the NTX platform is the ability to plug that in to any stage of the deployment of a digital initiative that gives that holistic view of what's going on across the network and where suspicious and malicious activity is taking place, able to eliminate that from the network and mitigate those risks moving forward and certainly the impacts. Now, thank you very much for your time. It's been my great privilege to be able to speak to you all today, and appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to tune into this webcast. What I'd also like to do is open up the lines for any of the questions that may be coming through. As I mentioned before, this is an interactive session, and we have some time now in order to take some of those questions. And I see there's a couple that are coming through now, so I appreciate those. If I take them in turn, the first one that I've got here is, it's interesting that CNI, or critical national infrastructure, is lagging behind in cloud adoption. Do you think this is just a case of due diligence, or is it a lack of resources for those organizations? Good question. I think probably it's a mix of all of those things. We need to remember that particularly with this sector, it is by definition critical, and therefore if something goes wrong in those initiatives, it's more than just an inconvenience or a failed project. It potentially impacts people's lives. And it's probably not surprising, therefore, that we wouldn't necessarily expect those organizations that fit within a critical national infrastructure category not to be bleeding edge and be the first adopters or take first mover advantage on some of those technologies. They are probably, by their nature, going to be far more cautious and wait for technology to prove itself before they embark on it. That said, I think that we're at that tipping point now, so even though they are slightly further behind than some of the other industry sectors that we covered in the presentation, 64% of them are either embarking on or actively engaged in planning for those type of initiatives. So whilst they are relatively further behind, that's not to say that they're not considering this at all. Next question, do you see any greater risk in using a single cloud provider versus multiple clouds? Yeah, I guess this is an interesting question based on what we were covering earlier in people taking a fairly blended approach versus those that are not. And I think that really, it depends on what the purpose of the cloud adoption strategy is. If this is just about applying different vendors because they have different features, then that of course is one thing. But if this is about spreading risk, it may not be addressing that. And I think the point here really is that regardless of whether you're looking at a single strategy or multi-supplier strategy, diligence needs to take place. And it needs to cover the type of questions that you'd be asking if you were building your own on-premise infrastructure. So, where will the data be residing? How will it be treated both in transit and at rest? What is the resiliency being provided as part of that rollout? And am I happy to have a resilient architecture or a less resilient architecture depending on the project that I've got? And of course, does the financial stability of that provider also meet my expectations? What is their track record? So cloud really needs to be treated as an extension of your own infrastructure in terms of answering these questions. And those disciplines should really be the same regardless of whether it's an on-premise build-out or whether you're embarking on a single or a multiplier strategy. What are the benefits, or rather, would you agree that a benefit of turning to the cloud is that it takes responsibility, accountability away from the security team? Well, I think, again, this is an interesting question because not necessarily. So we saw earlier on that people are looking at outsourcing their security as part of their cloud deployments, and that's a legitimate route to go. But again, remembering that the same security principles do need to apply regardless of whether you're talking about your on-premise assets or whether there's ones in the cloud. And so if the objective really is to outsource the security aspects from a cloud perspective, then you must ensure that this is agreed and that the diligence has taken place to make sure that there is transparency across you and your trusted third party. And I think we just have one last question that we have time to answer here. My organization does not like the idea of losing visibility. What steps can I take to overcome this? Well, I think that this really comes back to providing holistic cybersecurity. So regardless of whether you're on-premise or in the cloud, looking at providing that visibility across those infrastructures is really important. So as people are looking to dissolve their network perimeters and look at a blended model, they want to make sure that they're not losing that visibility. And so making sure that you have visibility across your network infrastructure to be able to understand what's happening across your network is a really important part of your network detection and response capabilities. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, at Nominet, we're taking a fairly unique view of providing that holistic perspective with what we're applying at the DNS layer, which is one ubiquitous way of being able to gain that visibility across your networks, regardless of where those assets reside. So thank you very much for your time. We're just about taking half an hour in total here. Thank you very much for your questions as well. I'm very happy to have been able to be on point to answer those today. Please do visit our website for any further information. That's nominetcyber.com, and look forward to hearing from you and speaking to you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.